Welcome to this explainer. Imagine a critical flaw in the internet's infrastructure sitting completely undetected since the era of dial-up. Human researchers missed it for 29 years. Today, we're diving into the incredible, honestly almost unbelievable real-world coincidence that happened the very moment a machine finally found it on July 6, 2026. On one hand, you've got this highly technical, invisible battle happening deep inside our internet infrastructure, and on the other, you have literally the largest diplomatic gathering in human history trying to figure out how to actually govern the very technology fighting that battle. It's a massive story of cutting-edge code, global geopolitics, and a serious race against time. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to cover the Squidbleed AI dilemma, take you inside the Geneva dialogue, break down the three-position architecture, examine the China challenge, and finally discuss what Geneva can actually produce.
Section 1. The Squidbleed AI Dilemma and the Mythos 5 Paradox.
To really grasp the global panic around AI governance, you have to understand the fundamental paradox of models like Mythos 5. The exact same machine that is highly capable of launching a devastating, sophisticated cyber attack is ironically the only one capable of preventing it. Because of this extreme capability, the United States actually suspended access to Mythos 5. They deemed it just too dangerous, too skilled at identifying software vulnerabilities. It was simply too good at its job.
Now, what's really interesting about how this played out is the sequence of events. On June 12th, the U.S. suspends Mythos 5. That triggers a frantic 15-day negotiation period just to figure out the terms of restoring access. Now, during those 15 days, all the defensive cybersecurity discoveries that Mythos 5 could have been making simply didn't happen. That was the cost of the suspension. But then, on July 6th, the second access was restored for an authorized security audit. Mythos 5 immediately discovered a critical vulnerability in widely used internet infrastructure. This bug, designated CVE 2026-47779, or Squidbleed, had been sitting there totally undetected for 29 years. Human researchers missed it for 3 decades. Mythos 5 found it almost instantly.
And that brings us to the core definition of our dilemma, the dual-use governance problem. The capability required to identify a critical security flaw is absolutely identical to the capability required to exploit it. I mean, think about it. If you restrict the AI to stop the attackers, you completely blind the defenders, leaving 29-year-old critical vulnerabilities wide open. But if you permit the AI without restriction, you're essentially handing a devastatingly dangerous weapon to anyone with an internet connection. This is exactly why governing AI is so uniquely difficult.
Section 2. Inside the Geneva Dialogue, Historic AI Governance.
So, zooming out from that cybersecurity event, on that exact same day, July 6, 2026, for the very first time in history, all 193 United Nations member states convened in a dedicated forum to deliberate on AI governance. Just pause and think about the sheer scale of that for a second. Every single country sitting in the same room, with equal standing, trying to figure out how to control a technology that is actively rewriting the global order as they speak. They weren't just observers, they were active participants in the most consequential policy conversation of our era.
The leadership of the dialogue really tried to ground this massive bureaucratic event in high human ideals. Co-chair Egrisilda Lopez stated, "Our collective success will be defined by every voice, perspective, experience, and contribution that is shaping the path forward for AI," which, is a beautiful, unifying sentiment. But as we'll see as we analyze the source material, the distance between those lofty diplomatic principles and the complex geopolitical realities of governing tools like Mythos 5 is vast.
Section 3. The three-position architecture, clashing AI strategies.
And this brilliantly illustrates the structural tensions at play because the globe is essentially split 3 ways here. The U.S. prioritizes unilateral security, basically using export controls to abruptly cut off AI access to threats. The EU, on the other hand, advocates heavily for multilateral regulation and pre-market evaluations. Meanwhile, India and the Global South view AI as a vital development resource, demanding kill-switch protections against sudden shutoffs by wealthy nations. The problem? Fully satisfying any one of these positions almost certainly violates the core demands of the others.
To highlight just how complicated this gets, consider the European Union strategy. On the exact same day they were sitting in Geneva advocating for multilateral, global cooperation, the European Commission unilaterally launched its own independent AI cybersecurity plan back in Brussels. This requires AI models to be evaluated before entering the EU market. It's their working theory of change. Build domestic regulatory leverage at home to force better multilateral agreements abroad.
And the complexities definitely don't stop there. Take India's position, for example. In Geneva, they are fiercely demanding international AI access and sovereignty, arguing against sudden restrictions by foreign powers. Yet domestically, they enforce very strict content controls, including a 3-hour removal rule for AI-generated content, and ordered over 24,000 direct content blocks in 2025. We're just neutrally looking at the reality here. It's a fascinating tension, where states are demanding international sovereign rights while simultaneously enforcing tight domestic controls. The UN framework has to somehow accommodate this incredibly complex reality.
Section 4. The China Challenge, Rights versus Authority. Now we hit arguably the biggest hurdle. We're looking at two fundamentally incompatible visions for AI. On one side, you have the UNESCO framework, which provides a template for rights-based governance. It explicitly bars using AI for mass surveillance and protects individual rights. On the complete opposite side, you have China's Global AI Governance Action Plan. This is an authority-based model that explicitly requires AI to adhere to core socialist values and restricts outputs that might challenge state order. And both of these entirely opposing frameworks are being actively promoted at the UN.
So the crucial point is this: how do you manage that gap? The UN Secretariat simply cannot easily merge a framework that bans mass surveillance with one that mandates ideological adherence. To keep everyone, including China, at the negotiating table, the drafters in Geneva have to rely on extremely broad diplomatic language. They use general terms like safety and public good to essentially mask the deep operational incompatibility between a rights-based system and an authority-based system.
Section 5. What Geneva can produce. Diplomatic realities. Realistically, the dialogue can absolutely achieve a shared vocabulary for AI governance. It can record a firm baseline of where nations stand, and it can create minimum procedural commitments, like forcing countries to actually consult others before just pulling the plug on AI access.
Let's move to and see how this builds into what the dialogue cannot achieve. We have to temper our expectations here. The UN structurally cannot produce binding rules on national security export controls. It cannot create deep technical standards for capability assessment. It has absolutely no real enforcement mechanism for violations, and it certainly cannot definitively resolve the rights-based versus authority-based debate.
Therefore, it's absolutely crucial to remember that the July 2026 meeting in Geneva was just the initiation of a process, not the final resolution. The true test of this whole diplomatic architecture will come in May 2027 during the second session in New York. That is when we'll see if these shared vocabularies and minimum commitments can actually hold up in practice against the rapid evolution of technology.
And that leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. The entire world sat together in one room to govern AI. But while diplomats are carefully deliberating over vocabulary, AI models like Mythos 5 are uncovering 3-decade-old vulnerabilities in mere milliseconds. Is sitting together sufficient? Can our slow, deeply divided diplomatic processes ever truly keep pace with the blinding speed of AI? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.